Snapping is designed to help you position layers within the composition window so you don't have to keep going back and forth to the layers panel, to the comp window, especially when you're trying to create very precise positions. Now, we're starting with this blank composition, so we can really accentuate exactly what's snapping to what. But don't worry, we are going to create a real-world example here in the dedication comp once we understand the basics. So let's make sure we're in the positioning comp just by double-clicking it in your project panel. And let's start with some text. So I'm going to grab my text tool and click in the canvas, and let's just call this snapping. Now, obviously, you can choose any typeface you like. You can press Enter on your keyboard to set the text, or just grab the selection tool. Now, just so we can see things a little more clearly, I'm going to zoom in my magnification up at 100%, just scrolling with my mouse wheel. You could also press period on your keyboard. Now, I want to create a circle that this text can snap to. So let's start by creating a circle with a shape layer. Let's make sure layer 1 is deselected by clicking in my timeline, and then go up and grab the ellipse tool. If you don't see that, you can just click and hold up here next to the pan behind tool, and you'll see all your shapes. Now, let's click and drag to create a circle. After you start dragging, if you hold down Shift, it will keep the circle in proportion. Now I'm going to change the fill of this circle because that's a little bright. I'll change it to kind of a dark gray. Now we can grab our selection tool one more time. Now, if you look to the right of the toolbox, you can see there's a selection for snapping. You can see snapping either by using the selection tool or by using the pan behind tool. Now, let's start with the selection tool. And I want to snap the word to the edge of the circle. So I'm going to click on the word and start to drag, and notice nothing's happening, and that's because I haven't enabled snapping. So go up to the top and make sure we enable snapping. Now, when I grab the layer, I want to make sure to pay attention to where I'm grabbing it. So if I click in the upper left corner and start to move, see that square that's popped around the upper left anchor point? That's letting me know that that is going to be my snap source. See, if I click down towards the lower left, it's going to snap towards my anchor point. If I click towards the lower middle, you get the general idea. It really depends on where you're clicking. So I'm going to click towards the middle and then drag towards my circle. And notice as I got close, it automatically snapped right to the edge of my circle. And that's exactly what I wanted. But let's say I want to snap it to the edge of the circle here. Well, if you notice, nothing's happening. Now it'll snap to the edges of the bounding box around the shape layer. But if you want it to snap to a curve, you need to create a layer solid with a mask. So let's do that. I'll go up under Layer and choose New Solid. And we can make sure it's the comp size by clicking Make Comp Size. And I'll go ahead and leave it black just so it's not completely distracting. And let's click OK. Now go back up to your shape tools. I'm going to grab my ellipse tool and click and drag. Now this is going to create a mask on my layer solid because after you create the layer solid, it's automatically selected in the timeline. So now if I click and hold and drag holding Shift, my mask has been applied to my shape layer. Now let's grab the selection tool one more time and grab our snapping text. I'm going to grab it towards the left here. And now notice it's snapping to the edge of the bounding box, but if I move over towards the edge of the circle, it's snapping there as well. That's actually kind of a really neat, handy thing to know. Now that we've covered some of the basics of snapping, let's go into our dedication comp. I'm going to double click the dedication comp and grab the text tool, and I'll just go ahead and click in the canvas. Now, I accidentally clicked too close to the other text, so I'm going to press Escape and just click way down towards the bottom. I'm going to type the word run and press Enter on my keypad to set the type. Grab my selection tool. Now, with snapping enabled, notice I switched comps, it's still enabled. Snapping pertains to the project overall, not just an individual composition. Now, since I have so many layers that make up this comp, notice snapping is going to kind of run wild as I move around. So that's why I started in the other composition. I'd like to position this word run right up against the edge of the word dedication. So I'm going to click towards the top and then drag it till it snaps. Now, something interesting happened here. It snapped to the bottom of the text layer. If I move a little closer, it's going to snap all the way up to the edge of my comp. Now, the only other thing you need to pay attention to when you're positioning layers has to do with the anchor point. The anchor point determines how the object rotates around the scene. So let's say, for example, I wanted this word run to rotate after it slides into the scene. Well, I've got the position set up perfectly here. What I need to do is move the anchor point. And the way I can do that is by grabbing the Pan Behind tool. You can press Y on your keyboard to quickly select that. Now, with the Pan Behind tool selected, I can click on the anchor point and drag, and since snapping is enabled, it'll automatically snap to the edges of my bounding box. One interesting note, if I wanted to move, let's say, the layer instead of the anchor point, I could hold down Option as I'm dragging, and now the layer will move around the anchor point instead of the other way around. Now, I don't want to do that, so I'm just going to press Undo. And with my Pan Behind tool selected, I'm going to move it up to the upper left corner of the word run. Now that that's actually set up properly, I could grab my selection tool and reposition anything else in the scene. I want to show you how this can actually rotate around the anchor point. So if you grab the rotation tool, you can press W on your keyboard. I can click and drag on this layer, and now it's going to rotate perfectly well around the anchor point. And if I hold down Shift as I'm rotating, it'll snap in 45-degree increments. So if I wanted to create an animation, by all means, I could create some keyframes and slide this in, and then I could grab my rotation tool, and with snapping or using the Shift tool, I could make it, slide in and then rotate around the scene. So to summarize, when you're using the Snap tool, you want to make sure to either have the Selection tool selected or the Pan Behind tool. That way you can enable snapping. But also, you want to pay attention to where you're clicking on your source layer and exactly what it's snapping to with your snap destinations.